This day in sports history. Hey, thanks for checking back in for another edition of This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more info and more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. This is your host, Steve White. It's September 2nd, and on this day in 1956, it was one of the greatest acts of selflessness on a racetrack. It was the final race of the season, and the Formula One series was in Monza for the Italian Grand Prix. 3 drivers had a legitimate shot at the championship. There was series leader and 2-time defending champion Juan Manuel Fangio. He was a Ferrari driver, and he had a slim 8-point lead over his teammate Peter Collins and a Maserati driver, Jean Barra. Fangio was the cagey veteran, and he started the race on the pole. Collins was a 24-year-old rookie, and he started 3 rows back. The track at Monza had a reputation at that time of being really rough on tires. On the 5th lap, 2 other Ferrari drivers battling for the lead blew tires, but were able to limp their cars back to the pits and get fresh rubber. On lap 11, Collins blew a tire, but was also able to keep it out of trouble and get back to his pit for a new tire. Fangio seemed to be budgeting his car a little bit better than the others. Through 17 laps, he had managed to avoid any tire issues, but on lap 18, he had a different problem. Fangio's Ferrari pulled into the pits with a broken steering arm. The wheels were splayed in opposite directions. There was no fixing it. His race car was toast. Barra and his Maserati also would pull into the pits with irreparable issues and have to retire. That left Collins as the only driver on track with a solid chance to win the championship if he just stayed out there. At the halfway point, he was running 4th. By lap 35, he had gained another spot up to 3rd. He came in for new tires then, and when he saw Fangio and his retired race car, well, the rookie barely hesitated. He hopped out of his race car and gave it to his teammate. Fangio understood the rookie's sacrifice, and he was nearly moved to tears, but he got into that race car and he got back on the racetrack. Now, at this point, if a race car was shared between 2 drivers during the same race, the points would be split. If Collins had stayed in the car and finished the race, he would have won the F1 championship. Instead, Fangio moved up to 2nd place in the race, and he finished the race 6 seconds behind the winner to secure the points that he needed to win his 3rd straight points championship and his 4th overall. Fangio would win his final championship the following year. Collins figured that as a 24-year-old rookie and the success that he had had this season, he'd get another chance. Sadly, Collins was killed in a racing accident 2 years later in Germany. So this next one has become a hot-button issue in sports and in politics recently. And before I tell this story, understand something. I am not in favor or in opposition. This is a history podcast, and my mission is to bring myriad stories about sports to you. Whether it's the greatest or the first or the last, or one-of-a-kind event, or something really funny happened, or whether something changed the sports landscape. That's what I'm trying to do, okay? So I don't have an agenda. But on this day in 1977, Renee Richards became the first transgender player to compete in a major tennis tournament. Born Richard Raskind in 1934, he was a star tennis player at Yale, considered a pro tennis career after college, and was just as good in baseball, receiving an invitation to try out with the New York Yankees. Instead, he became a successful ophthalmologist, but was still conflicted about who he was at that point in his life. He underwent gender reassignment surgery in 1975 at the age of 41, emerging as Renee Richards, and then saying later, "It wasn't that I felt I had to do something about this. I didn't have a choice." She played in several different tournaments in California under another name to protect her identity, but she was outed after winning a tournament in 1976. After the ensuing fervor, Richards could have chosen to drift back to regular life and forget about tennis. Instead, she sued for the right to play, with the case appearing before the New York Supreme Court in the summer of 1977, with the judge ruling Richards was a woman and free to play women's tennis. She entered the U.S. Open 2 weeks later, and on September 2nd, played in the first round against reigning Wimbledon champion Virginia Wade. Her tennis battle did not go as well as her court battle, however. Richards lost in straight sets that day, but she continued to play professional tennis for several years after that, even cracking the top 20 for a brief stint before retiring at the age of 47. On this day in 1979, Philadelphia Eagles kicker Tony Franklin became the first barefoot kicker in the NFL. This was a fairly brief period, but there were several other guys who shed the shoe and the sock on their kicking foot to kick field goals, PATs, and kickoffs. The Eagles were playing at home against the New York Giants. Franklin kicked a couple of extra points, but he also missed one, and then in the third quarter, he lined up for a 46-yarder, and he nailed it. The Eagles went on to win the game 23-17, and afterward, as you can probably imagine, there was some interest in Franklin's barefoot kicking. He said the reason he did it was out of necessity. He said he couldn't really kick the football with distance or accuracy with his shoe on. He had experimented with going barefoot back in high school, but he wore a sock. Once he got to Texas A&M, he shed the sock and ended up kicking a 65-yarder in one game in 1976 for the Aggies. And in 2013, after decades of trying, Diana Nyad finally achieved her goal of swimming the distance between Cuba and the United States. Her first attempt in 1978 was derailed by strong winds and swells after spending 46 hours in the water and swimming close to 76 miles. 33 years later, in 2011, the then 61-year-old Nyad dove in the water again off the coast of Cuba. Her second attempt ended after 29 hours. Shoulder pain and an asthma flare-up scuttled that attempt. She made a third attempt in September of that year. That ended after box jellyfish stings caused her to have a severe respiratory reaction. Her fourth attempt in August 2012 bettered her previous attempts, but again, jellyfish stings and approaching storms ended that bid. On August 31st, 2013, Nyad plunged into the waters off Havana to make her fifth attempt to swim the 110 miles. This attempt did not include swimming in a shark cage, though, but there were shark deterrent devices and shark divers employed to provide a level of security. She also wore a mask this time to protect her face from jellyfish stings. Just before 2 o'clock on this day in 2013, Nyad landed at Smathers Beach in Key West, Florida, after spending 52 hours and 54 minutes in the water. Now, I've talked recently about the English Channel crossings and the first people who accomplished that feat. The swim from Cuba to Key West is equivalent to about 5 channel crossings. Nyad said that the inspiration for this swim developed from a comment that her mom made when she was 9 years old. And standing on a South Florida beach, her mom pointed out across the sea and said, "Havana is right out there. It's so close that you little swimmer, you could actually swim there." Time now for today's non-sports fun fact. Neptune has the strongest winds in our solar system at 1,300 miles per hour. Now that's 4 to 5 times faster than Earth's fiercest EF5 tornadoes. That's all I've got for you today. This and every episode of This Day in Sports History is researched, written, voiced, and produced by me, Steve White. I also created the music. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you back here tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.